What if the biggest sign of intelligence isn't how quickly you answer a question, but how much you notice before anyone else even realizes something is happening? We've been taught that intelligent people are the ones with impressive vocabulary, perfect grades, or endless facts stored in their memory. But psychology paints a much quieter picture. Some of the sharpest minds in the world don't spend their lives trying to sound intelligent. Instead, they spend their lives observing. They notice things that never become words. A smile that appears half a second too late. A conversation that suddenly changes direction. The tiny pause before someone says, "I'm fine." To most people, these moments disappear without meaning. To a highly observant mind, they're clues. And here's something even more interesting. Many people with this kind of intelligence don't even realize it's unusual. They assume everyone notices these things. Everyone sees the hidden tension. Everyone catches the contradiction. Everyone feels when something isn't quite right. But they don't. Most people see events. Rare minds see patterns. And if you've ever been told that you think too much, notice too much, or read too deeply into people, there's a chance you've misunderstood one of your greatest strengths. Today we're exploring 10 subtle things that highly intelligent people notice long before everyone else does. Some of these signs will seem surprisingly ordinary. Others may explain experiences you've had your entire life, but never knew how to describe. Let's begin 1. You notice small changes before they become big problems. Most people only notice change after it becomes obvious. You notice it while everyone else still thinks everything is normal. Imagine meeting a close friend every week. One week, they laugh a little less. The next week, they stop making eye contact. A few days later, they begin replying to messages with only 1 or 2 words. Nothing dramatic has happened. No one around you seems concerned. But something inside you quietly says, something's different. Weeks later, that friend finally admits they've been struggling for months. Everyone else is surprised. You aren't. Not because you predicted the future. Because your brain was quietly collecting tiny pieces, long before anyone else started paying attention. Highly intelligent people often process information this way. Instead of waiting for one huge piece of evidence, they notice dozens of tiny details that gradually form a complete picture. Psychologists sometimes call this pattern integration. Your brain naturally combines many small observations into one larger understanding. To someone else, these details seem random. To you, they fit together like pieces of a puzzle. That's why you often know something is changing before anyone can explain what it is. 2. You hear emotions hidden inside. Ordinary conversations words tell one story. Emotions often tell another. Imagine asking someone, "How have you been?" They smile. They answer, "I've been great." Most people accept the answer immediately, but your attention goes somewhere else. Their smile disappeared too quickly. Their voice became quieter at the end of the sentence. They looked away for just a moment before answering. Suddenly, your mind starts asking a question. Do they actually mean that? This doesn't mean you're suspicious. It means your brain naturally pays attention to emotional consistency. Research in psychology shows that humans constantly communicate through facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, and timing, often without realizing it. Highly observant people don't consciously analyze every signal. Their brain combines them automatically. That's why conversations often feel different to you than they do to everyone else. You aren't only listening to what people say, you're listening to how they say it. Sometimes, the truth is hidden between the sentences. 3. You notice patterns instead of individual moments. One rude comment doesn't define someone. One kind gesture doesn't either. Most people judge people one moment at a time. Rare intelligence usually doesn't. It quietly asks, is this becoming a pattern? Think about someone who always arrives late. Once isn't important. Twice could happen to anyone. But after 20 times, your mind begins seeing something larger, not carelessness, consistency. Or imagine someone who always apologizes, but never changes their behavior afterward. Eventually, your brain stops hearing the apology. It starts noticing the cycle. Highly intelligent minds naturally organize experiences over time. Instead of storing isolated memories, they build mental maps. Those maps help explain why some people repeatedly make the same choices, why certain friendships slowly become one-sided, why some relationships improve while others quietly repeat the same problems again and again. This ability doesn't make you judgmental. It often makes you more patient, because once you understand patterns, you stop reacting to every single moment emotionally. You begin asking a deeper question. What kind of story is this behavior telling over time? And surprisingly, that question often reveals much more than any single event ever could. Sometimes this ability can feel exhausting. You don't simply experience life, you continuously connect it. A conversation reminds you of another conversation 6 months ago. Someone's reaction reminds you of something they said years earlier. Tiny details refuse to stay separate inside your mind. They naturally organize themselves into meaning. And while that can occasionally make you feel like you're overthinking, it's often something very different. You're observing relationships the same way a scientist observes data, not searching for perfection, matching for understanding. And that's where rare intelligence often begins. Not in having all the answers, but in quietly seeing connections that most people never even notice. 4. You notice. What people don't say, most people pay attention to conversations. You pay attention to the gaps between them. Think about the last time someone apologized to you. Maybe they said all the right words. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. It won't happen again. Everyone around you believed them, but something inside you wasn't convinced. Not because you wanted to doubt them, because you noticed what wasn't there. There was no accountability, no specific explanation, no real ownership. Just carefully chosen words designed to end the conversation. Highly intelligent people often understand that silence communicates just as much as speech. Sometimes the most important sentence is the one someone avoids saying altogether. They notice when a person changes the subject the moment accountability appears. They notice when someone laughs to escape discomfort. They notice when a question receives a long answer without ever actually being answered. Psychologists call this paying attention to indirect communication. But outside psychology, it simply looks like this. You hear what other people completely miss. And over time, this ability changes how you understand human nature. You stop asking, what did they say? And you begin asking, why did they choose to say it that way? That single question often reveals more truth than the conversation itself. 5. You can sense when someone is pretending. Have you ever met someone who seemed incredibly confident, yet something about them felt fragile? Or someone who smiled constantly, but somehow looked deeply unhappy? Most people judge appearances. Highly observant minds compare appearances with behavior. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. They're charismatic, funny, confident. Everyone instantly likes them. But as the conversation continues, you notice tiny inconsistencies. They interrupt people just a little too often. They mention their achievements every few minutes. They laugh loudly, but constantly look around to see who's watching. None of these behaviors mean they're fake, but together, they reveal insecurity hiding beneath confidence. Psychology has shown that people often compensate for what they secretly fear. Someone afraid of looking weak may try very hard to appear powerful. Someone desperate to be accepted may become the loudest person in the room. Someone terrified of failure may constantly remind everyone of their success. Most people only see confidence. You often notice what confidence is trying to hide. Not because you're cynical, because your attention naturally moves beneath appearances. And here's the surprising part. The more accurately you read people, the less interested you become in judging them. Because once you understand that behavior usually protects an invisible wound, it's much harder to hate someone. Instead, you become curious. Pause here. For a moment, if you've recognized yourself in these first 5 signs, There's something you need to hear. There's a good chance that growing up, someone called you an overthinker. Maybe they told you, you're reading too much into it. You're too sensitive. You always notice everything. After hearing those words enough times, you may have started believing something was wrong with your mind. But what if the opposite was true? What if your brain wasn't creating extra meaning, but detecting information other people simply overlooked? That doesn't mean you're always right. No one is. But it does mean your attention naturally goes deeper than the average person's. And understanding that difference changes everything. Because intelligence isn't just about solving equations. Sometimes it's about seeing reality more clearly. Let's keep going. Point 6. You predict outcomes beforehand. They happen. People have probably asked you this before. How did you know that was going to happen? The truth is, you usually didn't know. You noticed the direction. Imagine watching someone slowly ignore their health, skipping sleep, eating poorly, living under constant stress. Most people don't worry. They only react when the crisis arrives. But your mind quietly connects today's habits to tomorrow's consequences. The same thing happens in relationships. You notice two people slowly communicating less, avoiding difficult conversations, replacing honesty with politeness, months before anyone says the words. You already feel the relationship changing, not because you can predict the future, because the future usually grows from today's repeated behaviors. Highly intelligent minds naturally think in trajectories. Instead of asking, "Where is this now?" they ask, "Where is this heading?" That small shift in thinking often makes your observations seem almost impossible to other people. But they aren't magic, they're patterns. And patterns almost always leave footprints before they become outcomes. 7. You notice contradictions between words and actions. One of the clearest signs of rare intelligence isn't noticing what people believe. It's noticing what people repeatedly do. Anyone can make promises. Anyone can speak confidently. Anyone can create a convincing image. Behavior is much harder to fake. You may hear someone say, "Family means everything to me," but they never make time for the people they love. Someone says, "Honesty is important," yet they become defensive whenever they're questioned. Someone claims to value kindness, but only shows kindness when other people are watching. Most people remember the words. Your brain quietly compares the words against reality. And when they don't match, you notice. This doesn't make you negative. In fact, it often protects you from disappointment because you've learned one important truth about human psychology. People usually reveal themselves through consistency, not through conversation. Anyone can act differently for one day. Character appears in what someone does repeatedly. That's why highly intelligent people often trust patterns more than promises. And more often than not, those patterns tell the real story. 8. You ask questions most people never think to ask. There is something unusual about highly intelligent people. They don't just look for answers. They question the question itself. Imagine you're sitting in a meeting. Everyone is discussing how to solve a problem. Ideas are flying across the room. People debate which solution is best. But your mind quietly asks something different. Are we even solving the right problem? That's the difference. Most people focus on the visible issue. Highly intelligent minds often become curious about what caused the issue in the first place. It's the same in everyday life. When someone suddenly becomes distant, most people assume they're angry. You wonder what happened before they became distant. When a friend makes a bad decision, others criticize it. You wonder what fear, pressure, or pain led them there. Instead of asking, "What happened?" you naturally ask, "Why did it happen?" That habit changes everything. Because once you understand the cause, the effect suddenly makes sense. Psychologists often describe this as deeper cognitive processing. But in everyday life, it simply means you're less interested in judging people and more interested in understanding them. That's why intelligent people often appear quiet. They're not ignoring the conversation. They're thinking about a question no one else has asked yet. And sometimes, One good question is worth more than 100 quick answers. Points 9. You notice yourself. While you're thinking, this might be the rarest ability on this entire list. Most people observe the world. Few people observe themselves. Have you ever caught yourself getting angry and somehow realized it before saying something you'd regret? Or noticed yourself becoming defensive and thought, wait, why am I reacting like this? That tiny pause is incredibly powerful. Because in that moment, you're no longer controlled by your emotions. You're observing them. Psychologists calls this metacognition. The ability to think about your own thinking. It sounds complicated, but you've probably experienced it without realizing. Maybe you're halfway through an argument and suddenly recognize that you're trying to win instead of trying to understand. Maybe you're convinced someone dislikes you until you stop and ask yourself, do I actually know that? Or am I assuming it? Those moments require something many people never develop: intellectual honesty. Highly intelligent people don't just question other people's beliefs. They question their own. They understand that being wrong isn't failure. It's information. In fact, some of the smartest people you'll ever meet change their minds more often than average people. Not because they're indecisive, because they care more about truth than being consistent. Their ego isn't attached to always being right. It's attached to learning. And that's an important difference. The mind that refuses to change eventually stops growing. The mind that keeps examining itself never really stops learning. 10. You realize that intelligence is more about awareness than knowledge. Here's the biggest misunderstanding of all. People often think intelligence means knowing more. More facts, more books, more information, but information has never been easier to find. A phone in your pocket can answer almost any factual question within seconds. What technology cannot replace is awareness. Awareness notices the emotion hiding behind the sentence. Awareness recognizes the habit quietly shaping someone's future. Awareness catches the contradiction between intention and action. Awareness sees the pattern long before it becomes obvious. That's why two people can read the same book, experience the same event, or have the same conversation, and leave with completely different understanding. One person remembers the words, the other notices the meaning. Rare intelligence isn't collecting information, it's extracting insight. It's seeing relationships between ideas. It's recognizing connections invisible to everyone else. And perhaps most importantly, it's remaining curious enough to keep looking. Because the moment you believe you've seen everything, you stop noticing anything new. The truly intelligent mind never loses its curiosity. It never assumes it has reached the finish line. It keeps asking, keeps observing, keeps learning, quietly, every single day. Now step back for a moment and look at these 10 signs together. Did you notice something? None of them were about solving impossible equations. None of them were about memorizing facts. None of them required a genius-level IQ. Instead, they all point toward one quiet ability: awareness, the ability to notice what most people overlook, to recognize patterns before they become obvious, to hear meaning hidden beneath words, to question assumptions instead of blindly accepting them, to understand people without needing them to explain everything. And perhaps the most valuable skill of all, to observe yourself with the same honesty that you observe the world. Because intelligence isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the person sitting quietly in the corner, seeing connections no one else has noticed yet. It's the friend who senses you're struggling before you say a single word. It's the colleague who predicts the outcome of a project weeks before everyone else. It's the person who values understanding more than attention. If several of these signs felt familiar, don't take them as proof that you're smarter than everyone around you. Take them as a reminder that intelligence comes in many different forms. Some people solve complex equations. Others solve complex people. Some people build incredible machines. Others quietly understand human nature. Both require intelligence, just in different ways. So here's a question I'd like to leave you with. Which of these 10 signs felt the most familiar to you? And has there ever been a moment when noticing something small completely changed your understanding of a person or a situation? Share your answer in the comments. You never know, the observation you thought was ordinary might be the very thing that makes your mind extraordinary. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior, make sure to subscribe to Psychology Origins, because sometimes the smallest observations lead to the biggest discoveries.